open, there was a lot of information coming out. We weren't going to be able to offer people's reusable cups. And we found that actually only 10% of our customers were bringing a cup back. So we were like, well, if we do that, it's like an opt-in thing. Whereas if it's just like mandatory that anyone that buys a coffee, we plant a tree. So it's a portion of our profit essentially, but we're like the manufacturing process, all of our packaging is compostable like yourself, but it's still the sort of manufacturing process and the delivery and all these other things, these other factors. So we teamed up with Trees for the Future, and every coffee that's sold, we plant a tree, and we're already up to about 2,500 trees within 2.5 months. Our aim is at least 10,000 per year, and that they're in sub-Saharan Africa. So they work with farmers that are maybe their land's just been destroyed because of the heat and all this climate change. And these trees are planted by the farmers. They work together, they educate them, they do it themselves with the help of the team. And it helps with shade, with wind protection, and they grow all these fruits and vegetables.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I am your host, Nicolette Richet, and on today's show, we have a wonderful guest, Ed Tatton from the UK, who now lives here in Whistler, British Columbia, and he is here to talk to us about how he started his company, BReD, made by Ed. So Ed's BReD is a company in Whistler that makes the most exquisite high-end sourdough bread that is delicious and tasty, 100% organic, made from organic ingredients, sourced as locally as possible, and it's all plant-based whole food. Now, what I love about Ed's story is Ed was born with a hole in his heart. And through that, he had medical procedures to make sure that he was okay. But it was his switch to a plant-based whole food lifestyle, really inspired by his wife, Natasha, co-owner in Ed's BReD. And he was able to take his health to another level. But of course, he didn't stop there. He wanted to help his community, his friends, his family, the whole entire Sea to Sky corridor get access to clean, real food as well. And so that is when he made his company fully plant-based, whole food, organic, and so much more, particularly made with love, made with compassion for the environment, for animals, for other people. So he is unique in the sense that when we look around the world at all the chefs that are out there that are using refined salts and refined sugar and refined oil to try and make their food taste better, Ed is not doing that. He's actually using the beautiful taste that nature provides us and giving that to us in its whole form so that we can benefit health-wise, emotionally, spiritually, and so much more from eating this wholesome food made in the best way possible that actually contributes to health instead of taking away from it. So when you go into restaurants after hearing this podcast, I really want you, as a listener of our show, to sit there, to just look around at the food that you're putting on your plate. Because as Michael Pollan and so many other scientists and researchers and foodies and nutritionists, medical doctors who understand that plant-based whole food is medicine, as they say, the food that goes into your body that you choose to put in your body either will harm you or it can heal you. As you know from the work that I do with my clients all around the world, we use food as medicine to help get rid of the inflammation, to help stimulate regeneration on a cellular level so that you can successfully reverse your chronic diseases like infertility and diabetes and heart disease and autoimmune disorders, everything like multiple sclerosis and Crohn's disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, and so much more. You do not need to be living with these chronic lifestyle diseases. Those are diseases that are caused by your environment. Now, a lot of people are walking around thinking that they don't have any chronic illnesses because they take blood pressure and lowering medications, or because they take insulin balancing medications, or because they are taking fertility drugs and eventually were able to get pregnant after years of trying. So then they don't realize that what they actually have is a chronic disease. Our reproductive system operates optimally when our body is nutrified. Our mental health issues are no longer there when our body is nutrified, because of the fact that your brain needs nutrients, macronutrients, micronutrients, at every single nanosecond of the day. So if you're not giving your body those nutrients, your mental health suffers, your physical health suffers. You get chronic diseases that are plaguing our nation and claiming lives that they don't need to claim. So that's why I love having Ed on our show for this podcast, because of the fact that he's a chef who was able to change the way the industry was operating. And if we stand any chance of tackling the chronic disease epidemic that is upon us, we are going to need more chefs to step up, to stop using those refined products, to bring in more vegetables, to reduce the portions of the meat, animal-based products that are out there that they're using, to stop dousing our food in refined oils and cooking them at high temperatures, to stop smothering our food in salt and sugar. These are drugs. Ultimately, these refined oils, sugars, and salts are drugs that we are addicted to. And I know you're addicted to it. I know I'm addicted to it. It's why I cannot have these foods in my house, and not because I'm a binge eater or somebody who has an eating disorder like so many people have in our society, but because I know my brain is an animalistic brain. I am governed by my amygdala. That's my limbic system, the animal in me that is hundreds and hundreds and thousands of millions of years old, that is really on the hunt for nutrients. And so when we see a bag of chips, that bag of chips contains oils and sugar and salt in high quantities. And so my animalistic brain is actually trying to conserve energy. And so by crushing that bag of chips and eating that bag of chips in one go, or eating that steak in one go, I would be fueling my animalistic desire for nutrients right now, so that I can go and rest, so that I can recoup my energy, so I can go out there and on the hunt again. Because, our brains are thinking that we may not see another meal for another few days. And so it's always looking to maximize the amount of nutrients it's getting. And it will get them from anywhere. It's not very decisive in thinking, well, I should just get it from plant-based whole foods. Instead, because we've been raised on these refined processed oils, sugars, salts, flours, and colorings, and so many other things that are in our food, our body is wired for efficiency and to get as much of that stuff as you can in one shot. Now, it doesn't mean it's good for us, though, because our body ultimately doesn't really care if it dies at 50 or dies at 100, because if you make it to 30, 35 and you've already delivered children, then you've done a good job and nature doesn't have much need for you. You're pretty much just taking up resources on the planet, is how the whole entire biological system is operating. There's a huge argument to say there's not really a need for humans after 35 years old. And we see this in our cells are slowly dying. If you are consuming a diet that's high in meat, high in animal products, and high in refined products and processed products and toxins and glyphosates and insecticides and pesticides. But we can stave off that slow decline, that aging process, and we can actually flip that and contribute to living long and well, disease-free. So that means living into our 90s and even our hundreds, being disease-free, if we stick to eating predominantly plant-based whole foods, and in their complete form, in their abundance. As Michael Pollan says, there's over 300,000 edible plant species on the planet that we can eat. And if we were to consume as much of a diversity as we can in any given day, in any given week, and in any given month and year, that is what's going to contribute to us living long, but also living well. Because I know all of you have been touched by somebody who has a chronic disease, who has diabetes and heart disease and MS and infertility, and you know the pain that is associated with seeing a loved one in pain. You know the feeling that is associated with actually having that chronic disease, feeling lethargic and that you can't participate in life or work or your relationships to the complete, utmost, fullest way that you could if you didn't have that chronic disease. So you can change that. And it really starts with the next bite you put in your mouth. And that is what Ed Tatton from Ed's BReD here in Whistler, British Columbia is doing. He is giving you the opportunity to be able to choose a healthier option. And we need more chefs on the planet who can do that. So I just want to congratulate Ed and his partner, Natasha, for bringing good, wholesome food to our community. And let me just tell you a little bit more about Ed before we begin. So Ed is a professional trained chef who went to culinary school. He worked in high-end kitchens all around the world in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And he did what so many people in Whistler do. They come to Whistler to visit for a ski season, a snowboard season, and they fall in love with beautiful British Columbia and the ski resort town of Whistler, BC. And so, of course, he moved here permanently. And then, you know, to be able to survive in this town, you either need to have a really good job or you need to create a business. And that's exactly what Ed and Natasha did. They created Ed's BReD. So Ed was born with a hole in his heart, like I was saying. And at age 25, he had a stem fitted into his aorta. But he didn't really want to be on those meds that he was put on. So he decided to follow in his partner Natasha's footsteps. She was vegetarian since she was 7 years old, and she inspired Ed to go fully plant-based, whole food, vegan. And with that, Ed was able to come off of his medications. So in this show, Ed is going to share what it's like to work in the restaurant industry, in that business of trying to provide tasty food to people, but how he took it a step further and said, no, I want to provide tasty and healthy food to people. So we're going to walk that path with Ed and follow his journey. And then, of course, how he went on to creating BReD and then having the community go wild for it. And that's what enabled him to open up Ed's BReD, which is so delicious. So if you're ever in the area, please come and visit his retail shop, get a loaf of his bread, give him a hug, you know, maybe post-COVID, you can give him and Natasha a hug and thank him for all the work that he does and for inspiring other chefs out there to start preparing healthier, more wholesome meals for their guests and their clients. So without further ado, let's jump into the show with Ed from Ed's BReD. Thanks for being with us, everyone. And you know what to do. If you like this podcast, please share it with a loved one. Please share it with a chef in your community so that you can inspire them to take that step to start bringing healthier food to you. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Eat Real to Heal podcast, where I am your host, Nicolette Richey. And on today's show, we have a very special guest, Ed Tatton from Ed's BReD, and he's going to take us through his journey of being a traditional French cuisine chef, and who takes us through the journey of his world into veganism and healthy cooking and eating, and his incredible company, Ed's BReD. So welcome, Ed, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really fun to be here with you today.
Yeah, really fun to have you as well, because we don't often have a lot of Whistler folks on our podcast. And so to have somebody from, you know, our hometown here, and, you know, you're in Whistler, I'm in Pemberton. We're 30 minutes away for listeners who don't know where that is in the world. We're on the western side of Canada in British Columbia in beautiful BC. And yeah, you have created an amazing business in our town, like really, truly a homegrown local business that is doing all things right, in my opinion. Would you agree?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And it's nice to be here, because last time we saw each other, it was before I opened, but you helped me a lot. You gave us some good advice. So
yeah, I thought the advice I was giving you was don't open a retail shop, but you still went ahead and did it, which I love.
It was very inspiring. We met for a coffee, and I remember we connected through a mutual friend. I think a girl that used to work for you, and yeah, it was great. And you sort of recommended, you know, a few good lenders that we could use for financial help. And I remember you sort of grabbing your phone out and just doing a few numbers, and you were like, I think this could work.
Oh my gosh, did I see? I forgot all about that. You know what I remember from that meeting is, I mean, I meet with a lot of entrepreneurs or people who are just wanting to launch a business. And, you know, you already had an established product, you know, were already, I mean, well established, and you were just wanting to now move into the retail space. And I mean, I love the retail space. I think it's amazing because you get to connect with people face to face all the time. Some people say it's risky, but I mean, if you are constantly planning and looking at the future and setting goals for your quarterly goals and your annual goals, then, you know, you can really make it work. And you guys have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, at that point we were running it just as a Facebook business. So it was all pre-order. I was renting the kitchen that I worked at as the sous chef in Whistler, out of Bistro. And it was great. It was like a pre-order, so zero waste. So sourdough, all naturally leavened, and each week it would change. And it was nice. It was building and building, but it was at the point that I met you, it was sort of without growing the equipment and the space. And like you said, we wanted sort of a brick and mortar location where we could expand the product range. And it was like moving market research. So it kind of all fell into place quite nicely.
Nice, nice. And I remember I had just taken a niacin tab, a B3 tab, and I thought I had taken it like 2 hours before we were scheduled to meet. And for some reason, it kicked in our meeting, and I went like beet red all over. And I was like, oh my gosh, as if I'm having a niacin flush right now in our meeting. Anyway, I remember that a lot from our meeting. So I want to go back because you have a very interesting history that led you up to, you know, creating Ed's BReD. But, you know, I want to take people through the journey of like, what is it like to just make bread? Because it is, I mean, an ancient tradition. So I'm sure you had to learn all about that, which I want to teach people. But you know, you were trained and I'm going to get the terminology wrong here, but you were trained um, as a chef, like a traditional chef, cooking seafood and meat and using lots of salt and butter and all of the ways that, you know, majority of chefs on the planet are trained.
Mm.
And what
Yeah,
made you,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, what made you want to become a chef, first of all?
My mum's a very good cook, so I guess it comes from her. When we were kids, she would always make us sort of pack lunch boxes and things, and I would always make cakes with her in the kitchen. So I think it came from her, but no one in my family was, you know, in the actual hospitality business or anything. And I just had a passion for cooking and keeping busy. And my dad, I was terrible. I had a paper round as my first job and was really bad at it because it was a free newspaper. So my dad took me to this little restaurant where we lived and said, look, you know, you can wash dishes, you can be in the sort of, you know, hustle and bustle and earn your own money. And it just grew from there. I knew I wanted to go to catering college. We were lucky in nearby town. There was a very good sort of catering college. So studied there for 3 years and again worked at another restaurant. And then from there went into sort of the Michelin star sort of fine dining kitchens, which I liked because I like the discipline. I like the sort of like preciseness of everything. I liked we had a beautiful vegetable garden with a gardener that we could go out in the morning and harvest fresh vegetables and fruits. And then we could use them straight away that day, which was amazing. And then it just grew, the passion grew. And then I realized, you know, I could travel with this trade as well. So I traveled to Australia, lived there for a year and worked in some great restaurants there, and New Zealand for a year as well. And then moved back to the UK for 5 years. And then eventually found myself in Whistler in Canada. Working at a great sort of farm to table restaurant in Whistler Village called Out of Bistro. Was working there as the sous chef. And it was great. Nick, the head chef there, is a great friend of mine. And he would give me full sort of control and assist with the menu design. So we did a lot of that together. And then my passion for vegan food, vegetarian food just grew and grew. Through my wife, mostly, that came the sort of inspiration that she was always more of a vegetarian.
So let's hold on there, because I want to really look at this transition and just go back to, I love how you mentioned, for example, working in the restaurant where you have, this beautiful fruit and vegetables and herbs and, leafy greens and everything growing in a garden just outside the restaurant. But what is so fascinating to me is how chefs can take this amazing produce and literally butcher it, like with, and at the time you didn't know, like you thought like, okay, we're using fresh food. It's local. It couldn't be grown any closer to the restaurant, so from a sustainability perspective, that's amazing. But then we take this great food and then smother it in salts and refined products and turn and deep fry it and do all of these different things. And so we're turning this healthy food, which is like there to prevent disease, but then chefs turn it around. And I know they don't even, really associate what they're doing in that cooking phase, right? And food prep phase. Mm-hmm. And so when you were in the UK, like what was your diet like? Were you, a healthy eater growing up? Were you?
Yeah, I would say relatively, like I said, like I've always, when you're cooking this sort of food for, customers that are paying a lot of money, like some of these restaurants, they would pay a lot of money. Then as a staff member, you would just eat something really simple, like a pasta dish or a salad or something, because maybe you'd only have 10-15 minutes at your break, and then you'd have to get back to it. So one chef is normally given the task to feed 10 or 20 staff members, so it's just a big one-pot wonder. And sometimes that can be, I find that more interesting, because it's sort of, you have to be quite skillful in getting flavors, making something quickly that's going to be nutritious and sustain everyone for the rest of their shift.
Yeah. So, and that part's too, like I've worked in the restaurant, I had worked in the restaurant industry serving mostly in a lot of bars and that serve food as well. And I remember, because I've been into health for about 25 years and, where food is medicine. But I remember, asking, for example, the Szechuan green beans that the chefs would make and serve to our customers. And I would say, well, can you do it without salt and oil? And the chefs would be like, no, I can't cook without salt and oil. And they get so frustrated that I was asking for literally like just steamed veggies, a whole, variety of them, but they didn't even want to serve it to me because they're like, it's not going to taste good. And I'm like, no, it will taste good. Like, just give me my vegetables without the salt and the oils and I'll be happy. Yeah. So chefs definitely is so skilled in making food taste incredible, but there's a palette of what the customers want, but then there's also the palette of what people need to stay healthy as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, generally I've had always eaten healthily. Like I said, when I've been at home, we all have always eaten a veg heavy diet. Mm-hmm. And even like I said, with growing up with my mom and everything like that, she had 4 children. So she had to be quite frugal with sort of money and everything. So she couldn't, afford like these amazing like olive oils and things like that. So it was normally just like boiled broccoli or boiled carrots, with some other vegetables and things. So I think that's where my love of vegetables started, and then it's just progressed. And as you sort of educate yourself, like you said, you eat better and you look at ingredients in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And we have, the Michael Pollan says that we have like 250 plus, edible species, plants on the planet that we can eat. So it's not that, when you want to include vegetables and produce and fruit and stuff into your diet, that you're minimizing, or, a lot of people are on these elimination diets when it's like, no, it should be an abundance diet, right?
Yeah, I think I heard, it's interesting you say that, because I think I heard the average person consumes between like 7 and 12 vegetables in their diet. Yeah. They always go to the store and they just buy the same things. And when your plate could be, you know, a rainbow of colors and nutrients, and they balance off each other as well. You know, like certain minerals and vitamins unlock other vegetables, so you get even more out of those.
Exactly. And that would be super fascinating if all chefs thought like that. Like, how do we pair these so that we're unlocking nutrients and making them more available to our customers, as opposed to, you know, a lot of the cooking techniques, you know, of just like slamming everything with butter and oil and salt, then that actually deprives your body of nutrients. And then causes a whole array of other problems. So when you were at Alta Bistro then, what was that like trying to introduce, you know, you had obviously, you know, great people to work with who were supporting it, but, you know, was it intimidating, or what was that like to want to include more healthy foods?
First, I remember we put on a dairy-free, egg-free, like a vegan dessert. And there was a bit of skepticism, like, how's this going to go? And then we rolled that out for a little while. I think it was kind of a raw blueberry cheesecake, actually. And it sold so well that the owner, Eric, actually was like, this is great. Actually, our dessert sales have increased because a lot of people, you know, they didn't want something. They might, you know, avoid dairy. They might not be vegan, but they might be avoiding certain things in their diet, or gluten, or whatever it might be. So I think for a business owner, then it sort of made sense. Okay, if we can increase sales, then it's going to be easier to get the ball rolling and get more options on the menu. And then the same with the sort of savory dishes. Instead of, I used to hate going out for dinner or lunch somewhere, and they say, oh, we can make it vegan, but we have to take this away and we have to take this away, and it's like an incomplete dish. So why not just make our vegetarian options vegan? And then there's no substituting. It's like, yeah, this is great for vegetarians and vegans. And maybe, you know, we'd substitute nuts. So for sunflower seeds or something like that. So just really bringing everyone together, and everyone feels included, and they don't feel like they have an insufficient dish. And then I think that's when it really sparked my excitement, that I'd cooked with all these animal-based products for so long. And then when you make sort of like a cashew cream, you get that creaminess and the richness, but it doesn't coat your taste buds. So you can't really taste any other flavors. Whereas the cashew, you get that delicious, silky, smooth consistency, but you get all the other herbs and flavorings that you've got in there, and the vegetables. So that's when it really sort of like, I think the light bulb went off, and I was like, wow, I really want to dive into this more and explore, you know, fine dining, plant-based restaurants. And that's when a friend told me about Matthew Kenny in America. And I was like, right, that's the next restaurant I'm going to. And I went to LA and ate at his place in Venice. And now we're actually doing his online course. There's a Future Food Institute online cooking course that me and Natasha are doing together just at home in our spare time. And it's amazing to still find new techniques and new processes.
Yeah, it really is. You know, there's so much learning that needs to take place, and there's several courses, and we'll put them in the show notes as well, so people can access those courses. We have a course too that we just launched, and hearing your story, like when we're in the pre-recording conversation just now, I was like, oh my gosh, we need to partner with you on our new plant-based whole food chef course for chefs. And, you know, and it's not to teach people actually like how to chop food. It's not to teach people how to, you know, make a beautiful dish. It's to teach chefs about the science behind not using butter, oil, salt, and how do you change your customers' taste buds over to appreciate the actual real flavors that are in these, you know, 250,000 plus vegetables, and make them actually crave your food, because now they can eat as much as they want, as often as they want at your restaurant, never feeling like they're indulging, or especially because, you know, 1 in 2 people are dying from heart disease, 1 in 3 people have diabetes. So a lot of people can't eat out at a lot of these restaurants anymore. So we want to teach the chefs the science behind, you know, for example, Matthew Kenny's course. And so I might be calling you after this podcast to be like, Ed, we're partnering. But so as you're making this transition, obviously, I mean, Alta Bistro, I love that restaurant. There's only probably 2 restaurants in all of Whistler that we ever, eat out at when it comes to fine dining. And Alta Bistro is definitely, well, it's actually Alta Bistro would probably be the only one other than sushi, right? The
Yeah.
next closest healthy thing.
Yeah.
So you started making these changes. And then when did you get into the bread making side?
So I probably made my first loaf of sourdough about 12 years ago at a little French bistro restaurant that I worked at in Bristol in the UK, which is on the West Coast. So when we came back from Australia and New Zealand, we wanted a change. So we were both sort of grew up on the East Coast, like the London sort of area and the Southeast. So we thought we'd heard great things. We'd got into surfing and just wanted a change, so moved to the Southwest. So I worked at a great restaurant there. Again, it was a bit more simple. It was kind of still farm to table, but just not as sort of refined, just good, sort of healthy, everything made in house. And the head chef and the owner wanted to start making baguettes and sourdough to serve in the restaurant instead of buying it in. I love the way that sort of you make it yourself, you can control quantities, because I hate food wastage. So instead of buying in and guessing how much you need to make, or you have to pre-order the bread 2 days before, you don't know how busy you're going to be. So you could literally make it the day before, say, this is how many people we have reserved. We know we'll use this much. And he didn't really know much. So we kind of learned the process together, which was amazing. It was really good to start the sourdough process in that way.
And making sourdough is, I mean, it's not easy. We've tried so many times to make it, and for some reason my husband and I, like, it comes out as biscotti, so we just turn it into biscotti.
And that's where it started, and I sort of liked it. I wouldn't say I enjoyed the process, and then sort of made it, and then we moved to, so over the course of that 5 years living in Bristol, stayed at that restaurant. The head chef opened up a sort of boutique hotel. He became executive head chef, so moved me there as the sous chef, then the head chef. And we made bread, and we ended up making 5 different breads each day. 3 of them were sourdough. So me and the pastry chef, I sort of then passed on what I knew, and we kept learning. Like you said, it's a constant with anything food-based. You're always learning, and that's why I love it. I think even when I'm in my 80s, I'll still be, wanting to learn more and playing with new techniques and things. And then, so that carried on. Then we moved to Whistler, worked out a bistro. They were buying bread from Nicolette Lodge because they had a good pastry section, and they would send us baguettes. And it comes back to the food wastage. We always had a standing order of, I think it was 10 baguettes on the weekdays and 20 on the weekends. Each day it would turn up, it would be fresh, and it was delicious. It wasn't sourdough. And I sort of said to Nick, look, I think we could start a program here. I went off to the island because actually I was only supposed to be in Whistler for 6 months. It's the classic story. You come for 6 months, and I've been here 7 years now. So I had a 6-month contract at Alta Bistro. And then it was the shoulder season, so it was getting a bit quiet. So I decided, me and Tash went to Vancouver Island to do some woofing, which is working on organic farms. So it was good because we love fruits and vegetables. We wanted to support local farms, and it's just a trade. So you work between 5 to 7 hours a day, and they feed you and give you board, so accommodation. So it's a nice trade-off, and you have free time and can explore, go on hikes. And during that time, obviously I'm a chef used to working 12 to 14 hour days. I was like, perfect, I'll start a sourdough culture. So I started a starter, would start making bread and take it, for the meal times for the farmers and their families, and just gift it and say, you're helping us, like just buy some organic flour, make some sourdough. And then brought that culture back to Whistler to start working at Alta Bistro again. And that's when the bread program started, and the sourdough started at Alta Bistro. from that starter that I'd sort of, created on the island. And then it grew from there. I loved it so much. I was making sourdough at home as well, gifting it to friends. We will go into local yoga in Creekside with Tina.
I love Tina.
She's an amazing lady, and she sort of, as soon as she heard that I was making sourdough, she was like, right, that's it. You've got to bring me a loaf. And we would trade sort of, a yoga pass for a few loaves of bread each week.
Amazing.
So perfect. I was like, I get free yoga, she gets bread. It's a great trade. But then what happened was I'd be bringing warm bread to the yoga studio, and the other students would be like smelling it during the class. They'd be like, what is this? So it kind of grew from there. It was like sort of, again, another light bulb went off, and Tash said to me, maybe you could speak to Alta because they don't open for lunch. Maybe you could rent their kitchen. It's a professional kitchen. It's all been, tested and checked. You could make the bread on Wednesday and bake it on Thursday, and people could just come to the restaurant and collect it. And
so smart.
That's how BReD was born, really. From the yoga studio, people just naturally taking an interest. And I remember the first ever week I made 30 loaves, which is the most amount of bread I'd ever made. So I was a bit nervous, I'd made sort of a dozen or so for restaurants, but more than double in that. And then I think by the third or fourth week, we were up to 50 loaves, and it just kept growing. And people were telling each other, like, that I wanted it to be this sort of like hipster, cool, like underground bread club, Brad Pitt style. But what ended up happening, it was young mums. It was basically the mums club that they would drop the kids off at school and then come and pick up their bread. But it was
and
awesome.
I remember that. Like, I remember that fully when you were selling your yoga at the yoga studio. I never ended up getting a loaf for myself, but it was the underground like movement that was happening. Like, hey, did you hear about this guy, Ed? He's making bread, and you can only get it. Like, it really was an underground movement. So yeah.
It's pretty funny. The local paper, The Peak, they ran an article 3 or 4 months in, and they said the best bread in Whistler that you've never heard of.
Totally. I remember that article too.
Yeah. So it was really fun. It was nice because I was making it on Wednesday, that people would come in and I would bake it in small batches. The ovens are small, so I would bake 10 in one oven and 8 in the other, because it was in the restaurant, there's 2 kitchens, and I would run between and serve people. And it grew and grew over the years. It was 18 months that I was doing it there. And I think on average at the end, I was doing 150 loaves in each week. So one week it'd be a sesame loaf. The next week it'd always just be one sourdough, but each week it would rotate. So also it was market research, in the sense I could see what customers would like. If sort of the sales dipped a bit, I'd be like, okay, so a walnut and fruit loaf isn't as popular because it's not as versatile, even though some people love it for breakfast. You can't make a sandwich with it necessarily.
I would, but not everybody would.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, jam sandwich.
Totally.
So it was very fond memories of that time.
Yeah. What I love about how you did this is that, just because we get a lot of, people who want to launch a business, and he'll come and sit with me, and they've never done any market research. They're like, I have this product, and, they've tested on a couple people, but they want to just jump right into making their product and getting a retail shop, or, just go, which is an okay way of doing it as well. Yeah. However, I think the market research is important, but also I love what you did, because you got to perfect the art of your product along the way. You got to test which product worked well. You got to see if you liked doing it at a bigger scale, like going from 10 loaves a week to 30 loaves a week to 100 plus loaves a week. I mean, you get to see if you actually like doing the work. And this is what I think, and I really encourage people to do that, is before they get a domain name, before they print a business card, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, use it and test your product over and over again, and do it for 6 months. And after 6 months, if you still like making your product, then go for it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It was it definitely made me really analyze, what do I want? When I started at Alta Bistro, I was the reason I was drawn towards that sort of restaurant is because that's where I could see if I was to open a restaurant, I would do something similar. You know, these huge fine dining restaurants like Araxi and Barefoot, they've got so many investors and huge, like millions of dollars, you know, whereas Alta Bistro is a family run restaurant. It was more achievable if I was to do something on my own. But they've sort of filled that gap in a way. And I saw, and then I was like, well, no one's actually doing, no, first of all, no one's doing like a vegan bakery, and no one's doing exclusively sourdough. Like we don't use any baker's yeast at all.
Wow.
So it was like, that's where the sort of the next light bulb went off. And we were like, okay, so we've kind of outgrown that. But fair enough. The restaurant were like, we kind of want our sous chef back now, because it was taking more and more of my time, you know, before I could manage it. And then understandably they were like, okay, Ed, so really, you know, we'd want our chef back and we need the space back. I was taking more and more storage. So it was a gentle nudge to sort of say, where are you going with this? What's the next step? And that's where we were like, okay, like, let's look at the finances. That's when we sort of met. And we were lucky enough, we had a property in the UK. So we decided, well, that's, you know, hard to manage now more and more. It was an old Victorian house. We decided to put that on the market because it was also the point where Brexit was happening. And we were like, what's going to happen financially with this? Is the property, you know, market just going to crash? Let's just sort of like, we've decided we're residents in Canada now. Let's make the switch and let's invest that into a business.
Wow.
In Whistler.
And you did.
And I think that's another thing. If you really believe in your product, you know, we put our property on the market, invested all of that money. And then that shows lenders that you really believe in it if you're sort of personally investing in that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because again, one of the number one rules of financing when you want to go out and get money is they'll ask you to put up 30% of whatever you're asking for. So if you're asking for 100,000, be prepared to put down 33,000 of your own money. And it could be, you know, in kind, you know, equipment, for example, or you're going to add your vehicle and donate that to the business. So, you know, but they have to see that you're willing to have your neck on the line as well, because it is risky. Any business is risky. And we did the same thing. We had bought a place in Whistler, one of the Whistler Housing Authority places, and we sold it. And we literally had $33,000 in cash that was just like there. For the first time in our life, we had savings. And I looked at my husband one night when we were laying in bed and I said, I want to start a cafe. And he's like, really? Like you've never even worked in a kitchen before? And I was like, I know, but I've seen restaurants, you know, I've worked in restaurants serving food and beer. And so we did that. He was like, yeah, go for it. And I think when you also put your money in, then you're going to be hungry because you're not going to want to lose it. So you're actually going to fight harder for your business as well. So I think it's a good maneuver. If you think you're just going to go out and borrow that money, then, you know, I've seen it.
You're right. It definitely drives you. You're like, okay, this can't fail, and I'll do whatever it takes. You know, if I've got to be there day and night, you know, I'll do it. I remember when we opened a few customers that obviously like had their own businesses. They're just like terrified. They're like, don't burn yourself out. Like we want you to be here in, you know, 10 years time. So
yeah. And have you burnt yourself out at all, or how has that been going?
The first year was very hard. Like I've worked hard in kitchens before, but I wasn't like you. I had a kitchen background, but I've never worked in a professional bakery. So I knew how to organize kitchens and I knew how they worked generally, but it's very physical, like lifting 20-kilo sacks of flour. Yeah. We get through, you know, in the busy times, sometimes up to a ton of flour, you know, in a couple of weeks. So, and that's got to come in the front door. It's got to be unloaded, and then you're using it. So, and lifting the dough as well out of the mixers. So it's a lot more physical in that way. But that's where I think like every morning have a nice like yoga practice, do some stretches, looking after your body, like you say, not just sort of with food, but sort of moving and stretching and things like that is quite key. So that's definitely helped, and that's from Tina. Like I remember going to Tina's classes and being like, I can only do yoga at her studio, but she kind of gave us a foundation to sort of be able to do a practice at home. It's definitely helped mentally as well. You know?
Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, you have to have the mental release, and it will, like, whether it's through music or reading or movement is always great. Yoga, and it doesn't have to be excessive as well. Like, it really can be gentle as well, but you do need to take care of yourself. And I know I've fallen short of that many times through running the business, because some days it's just like, it is a 12, 14, 16-hour day, or if it's payroll that week, it is tough, but it's critical. So if you have those tools first going into your business, which I had as well, and it sounds like you did, then it does make being an entrepreneur, I think, a little bit easier. Not that it's ever going to be easy.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, It was very well received. The first year was amazing. We were a week away from hitting our first birthday, and then the COVID lockdown happened. But we, like everyone, we just had to pivot, and we closed on a Sunday, and the next day, the Monday, we had an online shop available for people to pre-order bread and cookies and flour and all the cookbooks and things like that. So we were very lucky. We had a sort of a product that we could spin off. It forced us to open that online shop earlier than we probably would have done. And again, it made us analyze, what are our busy times when we do reopen the shop? What's the best days to open? What's the best hours to open? So it was a good thing. And also, like, focus on yourself. Like, am I going to burn out? Like, do we need to be working this hard and this many hours to achieve our goals?
Yeah. And you did it really well. We heard feedback from our customers. So a lot of our customers shop at your store all the time and order from you. And well, most of our customers do, actually. And I remember them coming in and being like, oh my gosh, like, Ed and Natasha have nailed it. Like, you had the phone system in place where that people would arrive, they'd put in their order, arrive, and then you just call them and be like, okay, it's your turn to come in. So you didn't even have to have like people waiting outside when COVID hit. Like, they were able to just come, which was brilliant.
Yeah, it was a scheduled pickup, so we'd only have the customer in the time. There was a lot of we have a lot of elderly customers. I think everyone, for that first month or two, it was the unknown. Everyone was so sort of like, they didn't really want to be around each other. So we had a table at the front of the shop, right by the doors. They would schedule a pickup, and every 5 minutes we would have a customer come in, and they were amazing. The community were really incredible during that time, and still are now. Like, they're so supportive. Word of mouth is so strong, in this town. And everyone be respectful of each other's, space and time, make sure they were there a few minutes early. It was all like, we'd pack as we went, and we would bake as we go as well. So they were still getting fresh little, warm bread. That's our thing, that we just bake. I hate going into bakeries where there's no bakers there. So the whole idea with our bakery is that it's all fresh. It's all baked on the day, sometimes coming out the oven 20 minutes before you pick it up.
That is amazing. My mouth is watering right now, by the way. If you haven't tried it, you definitely have to order your bread from Ed and Natasha the next time you are in Whistler. Do you deliver outside of Whistler?
We don't. I do love it. Sometimes we get phone calls. I had a guy call me the other day, and he said, we came to Whistler last summer and we had your cinnamon buns and they were amazing, but we're in Miami. Can you send us some to Miami? And I was like, I'm really sorry. They're just best like eaten as fresh as possible, but thank you so much. And he was like, he said, I can't stop thinking about them.
That's
it's just Whistler. So when people write to us these nice messages, I say, well, Whistler is an amazing place. Please come and see us and explore this cool area.
Yeah, no, we had the same thing too with our raw vegan desserts, because not a lot of people were selling them at all. I don't think anywhere in Whistler at the time when we had ours. And we got a call from the Netherlands, a guy asking, he's like, do you think you can cold pack it and ship me your cheesecake? Wow. And I was like, no, first of all, the thing weighs 500 pounds and, and it's, we want it to be as freshly made as possible too. So, But it is it warms your heart when people want your food from across the world. So let's go back into how what Natasha was doing at the time when she started transitioning into more vegan living. And I want to dive down that route because being a traditionally trained chef, what was that like and how was that transition when your partner is, doing it and bringing it home?
Sure. I mean, anyone that knows Tash or Natasha, she's very strong-willed. It's kind of like whatever she says is like, she's from London. So when she decided to go vegan, it was pretty much like no animal products in the apartment. And if you don't like that, then you can go with them as well. So I was like, okay, I'll get on board. That's the way it is. And that's why I love her so much, because she is so passionate and so strong-willed. You see these cowspiracy and these sort of documentaries on Netflix, and I don't know how people can watch those sorts of things and then carry on consuming certain animal products or any animal products. So for me, she just led by example, and I was like, well, this is not going to be a bad thing. With a heart condition and high blood pressure, I'd be silly not to get on board and to do this. And then luckily it carried on at Alta Bistro for staff meals and things like that. We would always make sure there was a vegan option. Sometimes it was all vegan, or at least there was, some stuff that myself and a couple of other people that preferred to eat that sort of way were able to still have a nutritious meal. And so it was well received at work, and at home it was easier and easier. We're both, even Natasha's an amazing home cook. So it was good.
And where was she working at the time? You had mentioned she was working somewhere and she was looking at the food that they were feeding the kids, or?
So she's a trained English teacher. So again, when we traveled to Australia and New Zealand, we both kept the same profession, which was great. So she could teach English. She studied at university to high level, so she was able to teach English as a foreign language in Australia and New Zealand. Once we got to Whistler, there were no jobs available in any of the private English language schools. So she reached out to Whistler Blackcomb. They're obviously one of the huge employers in town. Just went to a job fair and they gave her the position of first cook at the mid station on Whistler Mountain, cooking for 800 kids, which she had no experience in. But it's all packaged food. It was just sort of like reheating, and then she was like looking at the pack of the ingredients on the back of these things, these like wieners and these processed meats, and you're feeding your 5 to 10-year-old kids this absolute rubbish. And I think that really sort of like sparked it for her. She was like, I don't want to be eating this. I don't want to be feeding kids this. And each day she would go down to the village, and she would go, it was near the gondola, Naked Sprout, another sort of juice bar. And she would buy juice and a salad, and she'd go to the Green Moustache, and she's like, this, it makes you feel good. It gives you energy. It feeds your soul and your body and your mind and everything. And I think she sort of then just got talking to them, and there was a job available there. So once the winter finished, she worked at the Naked Sprout there. Not for terribly long, for a few months, but again, she was cooking and she was preparing these salads, and then sort of having to read cookbooks at home, and went more on the raw side for the summer. But again, it's good to have that balance. I think sometimes when you eat too much raw food, it can be hard for your gut and everything to process that. And that's where it sort of sparked it, and sort of she brought that back home, and she was like, you know what, I really don't want to be even eating eggs and cheese and dairy anymore. And that's where the sort of journey began. She went vegan first. I would eat vegan at home, and then I would eat when we ate out as a special treat, because I had that mindset, oh, maybe, if we went back 50 years where it was just sort of like you eat it as a special treat and you don't just eat it. Some people eat, meat 3 times a day, they overindulge, and that's why we're in for me as well, it became environmental, the animal welfare, and then for our own health as well. So there's so many sort of like different factors involved.
And that's what I love about, sometimes, it's hard because the word vegan itself can be taken out of context, for certain individuals where they think like, oh, you hippie animal lover, I'm never going to do that. And, they won't even open their minds to what it can mean. But what I love about plant-based whole food eating or veganism or vegetarian or whatever we want to call it and label it. I personally like the label nutritarian. It's where you just want the most nutrients. Every tablespoon that goes into your mouth of food, it should have the cleanest, most bioavailable nutrients. But there is the environmental side, and there is the animal welfare side, and there is the social justice side, and there, of course, the health side. That's how I got into this. But there's so many different angles. So just like yoga, I mean, you might go and do a hatha class and not like it, but then you don't even know that there's yin restorative, or that there's, incredible just breathing yoga that you could do, or walking meditation yoga. There's so many different types. So people are so quick to shut themselves off of things because of a label. But it's more important to think about, all the other benefits that you get from that, which in your case, from a health side, you had this heart condition, right? That had been treated through, thank goodness, through medical intervention that we have available. But I love what you said about the doctor when you went for your stress test, and that they said, and you had been off the medication. So just go into a little bit of that and tell us, your heart condition, how's treated, and then what the doctor said, the last test that you just had.
Yes, so they first found when I was 5 and starting primary school. I'm not sure, I can't remember if you call it the same, but 5 years old, starting the first sort of school. They did a little like test at the doctors, and they found like an irregular heartbeat, a small hole in my heart, and that sort of heart murmur. And then so it was monitored from then, and they always said I'd have to have a stent fitted. So basically just the aorta is shrinking, so then causes higher blood pressure. So when I was 25, so 10 years ago, I had a stent fitted. So it's keyhole surgery. So they go up, and it's basically a spring that they go up through your valve, and they just open it up, and it just goes inside the aorta, and it just opens the valve up. And they're amazing. They can last 20 or 30 years before the sort of cartilage starts growing around it and shrinking it. And they're always working on new ones. I'm sure by the time I need, another one fitted, it will probably last me for the rest of my life. But because I had that surgery, they still wanted to put me on medication after that, which I was quite shocked, because I thought, great, I'll have this operation and then they'll just monitor it and that will be it. I've never been a fan of medication. I've heard you on previous podcasts that you've done, you're the same. You don't really have anything at home, and it's all about food and things like that, and wellness. I try and always, even avoid paracetamol and those sorts of things. So it didn't really sit well with me that they were like, okay, you can go on medication now, and they were like, you'll just be on that for the rest of your life. But I was 25. I was like, there's no research. My grandfather at the time was 104. So I was like, I'm going to be alive a long time, fingers crossed. I've got good genes. So I was just like, okay, what can I do to get off this? So quit smoking, typical chef, sort of like ate better, did everything I could, and then moved to Whistler the next year, and just sort of with the more active lifestyle, being in the mountains, saw my local doctor and said, you know what, I don't really want to, I had to pay for the medicine here, because obviously in the UK we have the NHS, so it's free, whereas my travel insurance wouldn't cover it. So I think it's probably that sort of comes from my mum being a bit tight, basically.
This is a good motivation. That's a good motivation too.
Good motivation. So I was like, okay, how can I get off this? I don't want to take the medication. I don't want to pay for the medication. She was like, great, let's just start taking you off slowly. Let's not just take you straight off. So reduced it over the next 6 months, went to see her for the final visit. when I hadn't taken any for a couple of months. And she was like, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And by that point, I was sort of on a vegan diet, being a lot more active, doing the yoga. But she didn't really want to. I told her, I was like, it's great. I'm like, I've gone vegan and done all this, like, woohoo. And yeah, she was like, well, I'm not going to comment on that, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And then, yeah,
that part is so crazy, like, because so many of my clients, they experience the same thing where they're like off their meds now, their surgery's been canceled, they didn't even have to go get their surgery, and they're feeling amazing, they've lost weight, all their blood results come back normal, and the doctors don't even get curious about it. They're like, okay, you don't need any. And I'm like, no, stop and connect A to B. And this is what I would love to do in your case too, because we know that, number one, being off the animal-based proteins and fats increases your endothelial function, which is the lining of every vascular, part of your body. So every vein and artery and, every lining of your cells and muscles. And so when you are off animal-based products, everything flows. Actually, it's very fluid as opposed to rigid and stiff. And in your case, particularly, you would need the expansion of your aorta. You would need to have everything being very flexible and loose versus rigid and stiff, because that's when blood clots would set in, especially in your case. So it's really easy to look at the very basic science and get so excited and curious about this, because we have especially an epidemic of heart disease in our country and internationally as well. So that is very cool. And so now you're off all your medication?
Yes, I haven't taken any medication for about over 3 years. And I did actually see a doctor last week in Vancouver. Every 2 years they check up on me, and like you said, I had a stress test where they put me on a treadmill and increased the elevation and the angle and the speed and all this sort of thing, and they monitor it. And they said, oh, we're not going to take you to your maximum because of COVID, we can't do CPR, we can't do like resuscitate you if you had some sort of issue, because you have to wear the face mask and everything like that. So they just take you to about 85% of your sort of target heart rate that they want to get you to. So that was really interesting, and saw the specialist, and she said, you're doing really well. Potentially, when you're in your 50s or 60s, we might need to put you on medication, but that's a long way away. Yeah. So we'll just see as it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, your condition is a little bit different, because it sounds maybe more like it was perhaps like a genetic thing, or was it genetic they were saying, or was it more?
Yeah, it's not hereditary or anything like that. It's kind of, it's a little bit strange. They did mention, like, if we were to have children in the future, that they would do one more echo test on the baby, just to make sure that they catch it nice and early, just to monitor it. But they said it's an average person, I think, is 2 to 3% chance of having some sort of cardiac issue, and it goes up to maybe 4 or 5%. So it's still very low. But it is strange that no one in my family has any other conditions like mine.
Well, and this is the part too that, again, I mean, every time somebody tells me about their health issues, I just want to go through the full history and look at it. But the one thing we do know is that in a baby's development and in a child's development, if you don't have enough nutrients in your body at any particular time when there's a massive development happening, you can get things like ruptures, weakened, like hernias, because your intestinal system is not as strong and robust. But when you have a lot of nutrients in your body, then your body is in regenerative mode all the time. And so you just need basically that complexity of amino acids and micronutrients, which are more important than even the macronutrients, which you're going to get anyway. And so once you have enough of everything, your body will always repair things and stop it from getting damaged. Right. So, from a nutrient perspective, I mean, and it could have just been something as simple as that, an environmental, issue, and that environmental issue maybe being a lack of nutrients in your diet at one particular time, like maybe when you were 2 or 4, or who knows, right? And so this is why, I mean, it's a strong case for people to put nutrients into their kids' food and into their own diet, and stop feeding people refined foods and stop smothering things in animal-based products, which then further weaken your system, as opposed to building it up. So this is amazing for your heart. And I would love to, interview you when you're 55 or 60, and let's just see if you're back on those meds or not. I have there's a high probability if you stick with this lifestyle, you won't be. So I know that we have to wrap up here soon, but there's a few things here that I wanted to jump into. And what I love about your business and what I said at the beginning, that it's rare for me to find an entrepreneur that is truly doing everything right in their business. And you are one of those businesses that I really uphold as being a model for sustainability, a model for our community, because you take it beyond it just being a business transaction with your customers, with your clients. You have education that you're doing, but you also have teamed up with Trees for the Future. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So before COVID, when we opened the bakery, we sort of, people always say, is that to go? Is that to go? It's the first thing. So we were like, let's switch that around and say, is that for here? Would you like one of our cups? Outside the bakery, there's lots of seating in Creekside. So it was always like, we had nice ceramic cups. We were like, feel free to take it outside. We trust that you're going to bring it back. Most people aren't going to do that. If you give them the trust, then normally they sort of are happy to give that back. So that was always our thing. And then when the lockdown happened, we were able to look at a lot of data and look at, okay, when we reopened, there was a lot of information coming out. We weren't going to be able to offer people's reusable cups. And we found that actually only 10% of our customers were bringing a cup back. So we were like, well, if we do that, that's like an opt-in thing. Whereas if it's just like mandatory that anyone that buys a coffee, we plant a tree. So it's a portion of our profit essentially, but we're like the manufacturing process, all of our packaging is compostable like yourself, but it's still the sort of manufacturing process and the delivery and all these other things, these other factors. So we teamed up with Trees for the Future, and every coffee that's sold, we plant a tree, and we're already up to about 2,500 trees within 2.5 months. Our aim is at least 10,000 per year, and that they're in sub-Saharan Africa. So they work with farmers that are maybe their land's just been destroyed because of the heat and all this climate change. And these trees are planted by the farmers. They work together, they educate them, they do it themselves with the help of the team. And it helps with shade, with wind protection, and they grow all these fruits and vegetables. First of all, a lot of them are starving. They haven't even eaten when they first reach out to these families for 24 hours or more. And then within the first couple of years, it goes up to like 85% of them are eating well, and then they're able to produce enough to take to the market and then actually make an income from the farms, which is incredible. It's amazing. I really hope in a few years' time we'll be able to go out to Africa and visit some of these farms that our customers and that the company has helped. So that's really, really awesome project to be part of. Yeah, and also like we're striving to be more and more organic. We're not 100%, but our goal is to be as much as possible. We've just teamed up with a really cool company that sorry, I'm having a mind block. Wild Tusker, sorry, a cinnamon company. So it's organic cinnamon made in Sri Lanka, or grown in Sri Lanka, and then we buy it, and then for all the proceeds they donate a percentage to elephant sanctuaries. Wow. So it's just all these sort of like amazing companies, charities, businesses that are just sort of going a bit beyond. Our aim maybe in a few years' time is to become a B Corp company, where they analyze every sort of strain, like what the delivery process and where you're sourcing everything from, what ingredients you're using. So that's definitely in our sights.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put the B Corp link down there. So for companies who really want to be purchasing from organizations that have looked at all angles of their business. So not even just where they buy their supplies from in the distribution channels and operation channels, but also for how they're educating their staff, for example. Like, do they have, policies in place for, not just, race discrimination and the sexual discrimination or, gender discrimination, but looking at all areas of social justice issues. And do you have policies in place for your company? Also, do you hire, people of diversity and people of color and, yeah, so
Yeah.
being B Corp certified, it is a big deal. And yeah, look at the list of B Corp companies and choose to buy your products and other services through them. It's definitely really important. You'll have no problem getting B Corp certified for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of exciting things we want to put into motion over the next few years, like the espresso coffee is direct trade, so they're not certified organic. It's like a lot of the farmers in Pemberton, to get certified organic is quite difficult sometimes, so or expensive. So that's why we're sort of aiming sort of 90% organic, because hopefully the other suppliers that we use, they're pretty much organic, they're just not certified. So that's where we'd like to be. But all the flour that we use, all the grain, we do a lot of milling. We mill our own whole grains, is all organic. We use Vancouver Island salt, which is an amazing salt. Like, you open up the tubs and it just smells like the sea. It's amazing. If you're going to make sourdough with 3 ingredients, water, flour, and salt, why not use the best?
Yeah, exactly. And which is why your bread tastes so incredible. Like, it is really beyond it. I'm like going to call my husband right now because he's in Whistler, and I'm going to be like, make sure you go get some. And yeah, no, you're doing amazing things. And it's true what you said about the organic labeling as well, is that a lot of people say, well, oh, we can't trust organic labeling and we can't. And I'm like, well, what is your option? What are you going to do? Is, just buy everything non-organic because you don't trust it. But also they need to understand that it is a very complicated process. It's very expensive. It takes a minimum of 7 years, or average of 7 years, or minimum, I think. And, but one thing people can do, like if you're at the farmer's markets, or even if you're at the grocery store, you can go up to the produce manager, the person who does all the buying, and just say, hey, which companies, like which fruits and vegetables and grains and other produce do you have here that is not certified organic, but the company doesn't spray? And just ask that question. And I do that at farmers markets because, there will sometimes only be 2 or 3 options at the farmers market, but there's actually 3 or 4 other options where the people are like, oh no, we don't put anything on our crops. And that means you can be supporting them, as opposed to maybe just putting your nose up at, oh, they're not organic, or, it doesn't matter because I can't trust anything. You want to just ultimately talk to the farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, I mean, you're still supporting local. Maybe they can't do everything organic, but at least you're avoiding the plastic. The package is also a huge thing. So, why not put that money back into your local community as well?
Yeah, I love that. There's one more thing I want to touch on before I know you have a meeting to go to in 9 minutes, but I saw your post on what stone grinder you used for milling your flour. And can you talk just a little bit about that? Because in the vegan world and in, the vegetarian world, people think that, well, it says organic flour, so I'm just going to use it. But what they don't realize is that it's devoid of nutrients. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of the flours that you buy, it came from, like, in the 1960s, they started just producing bread as fast as they can. So they took out all the healthy things. They sort of like sifted out all the bran and the endosperm and all these sort of things that were like actually give you nutrients and everything. It's just this pure white, horrible flour that created these sort of like, Wonder Bread and things, where it's basically just pipe in this weird paste and bake it, and it was a bread made in 2 hours. And thankfully now we're coming back to sort of sourdough, slow fermentation. Our breads take 36 hours to make, fermenting the grains. And we love whole grains. Like we buy whole grain from Armstrong, which is about 5 hours from Whistler, still in BC. an amazing organic grain farm, but they only sell whole grain. So yeah, Fieldstone Organics, a great company. And they have a lot of heritage grains as well that people would never have used, like einkorn and emmer and these really interesting grains. And then we use a small mill called a Como mill, and it's just a small stone grill mill, and it doesn't sift out anything. We have done breads before where you can actually sift out the bran yourself and almost do like a porridge bread. So you could boil the kettle, pour over a small amount of water, and it just activates even more nutrients, allow that to cool, and then mix that through your dough. So a really interesting way of sort of using the whole grain, but not just directly in that way. You get lots more flavor as well. No oils or anything like that. The salt is very important just to slow down the fermentation so your bread doesn't overproof, but you can reduce that down. You could use 1% to the flour. So you could use 10 grams of salt to a kilo of flour. So you don't need to use much at all. We generally go 2 to 2.5%, just to bring out a little bit more flavor, but nothing compared to what you buy in the store. I mean, the average store bread that you buy has 25 to 35 ingredients. And like I said, our bread has 3. So you have to ask yourself, what are all those other ingredients that they're putting in to preserve? And we choose not to slice our bread, because if you slice as you go, it just lasts a lot longer. So there's a few things at our bakery that we do a little bit different, slowing it down, and trying to sort of, it's a bit hard now because you only have a shorter amount of time with each customer. We're only allowed 2 customers in the bakery at a time. So but we try and sort of like you say, educate people through our social media. Instagram has been great during COVID because people have been baking a lot more. Eds_bread, BReD.
Awesome.
But people can check us out for any sort of, bread photography and videos. We try and do sort of little tutorials and things like that, behind the scenes action.
Yeah, you have an amazing social media site and following. It's truly beautiful. And then you also have a promo code to offer people. So if you're in Whistler, you can use this promo code. Tell us about that.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're in Whistler or Vancouver or Squamish, and you know that you can make it up to Whistler to collect in person, like we said, we can't send it. You can get 15% off your total order, the first order, and the promo code is Eat Real to Heal. So yeah, you just go to edsbread.com, edsbred.com, and then so the discount code is Eat Real to Heal, and no spaces or anything like that, and they can jump on and use it and tell their friends, and hopefully they can shop some bread and cookies and cinnamon buns or whatever they like.
Yeah, definitely. And for all our listeners out there too, especially the ones that live in the area or are going to be traveling to Whistler, I mean, Ed's Bread is definitely the place where you want to be buying everything from, because it's whole foods. They're truly the definition of whole foods. You know, the nutrients aren't removed. In fact, the nutrients are enhanced and brought out. And so that's what you really want to be feeding your kids and feeding yourself and feeding your friends. So shop there and get everything from Ed's Bread. Ed, it's been amazing having you on our show. Thank Natasha as well for bringing the world of veganism into your life for us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Soon.
We have lots more to talk about for sure. Thanks everyone for being on the show, and we will see you for the next podcast. Hey everyone, I really hope you enjoyed that show, and I just want to repeat what the promo code is. It's Eat Real to Heal. Please use that on Ed's site when you order your next loaf of bread and other beautiful goods that he sells at his retail shop in Creekside, Whistler, British Columbia. Now, before I leave you to go off to work out your body, move your body, whether it's through dance or ballet or walking or biking or hiking or cycling, whatever it is, however it is that you love to move your body, So important that you do that in a way that inspires you, that brings a smile to your face. But before you go out there and move on to the next thing, I wanted to share with you that we are offering our Eat Real to Heal course, which is a 5-week program that teaches you the art and science of using food as medicine to reverse disease. Now, this course is normally $600, but as part of our 22 million strong campaign, we had bumped it down to $97. And then because we want to reach 22 million people by 2030 in learning about food as medicine and how to reverse their disease, for the month of October, you can get our course for just $22. That's right. So head over to the link below. Everything's below in the show notes, and you can access that course for $22. And you can take that course, understand how to use food as medicine, understand why you want to incorporate some additional juicing into your diet to get those nutrients that you just can't get through food in higher quantity. Understand how you do need to get some blood work done to understand your nutritional deficiencies, and also how to restore those nutritional deficiencies when you just can't get those nutrients through food at all. So we talk about that. We talk about how to detox your liver. It's 18 hours of instruction. So head over to our site and learn how you can access that course for $22 and start that 5-week program today. And if you don't already have a copy of my book, you can get my book on Amazon. It's been a #1 bestseller on Amazon for well over a year. Get a copy of that. It has helped people all over the globe understand what real food is, understand how to use food as medicine, and also help them to reverse their chronic diseases so they can get off their meds, have their surgeries canceled by their medical teams, and then they have been able to optimize their health and ultimately optimize their life so that they can live at their full peak potential that they were born to be. So thanks everyone for being here and listening to our show. Stay tuned for next week's podcast. We have a show coming out every single week. If there's somebody out there that has truly inspired you in the plant-based whole food movement, whether it's a researcher, a scientist, a doctor, or an individual that has used food as medicine to reverse their disease, message us. We'd love to get them on the show and to share their story. It's never easy when you go against the grain and you say no to the medications, or you say, sure, medications for now, but I don't want them long-term and I want to reverse my disease. It takes courage to do that because you need to understand the science, you need to understand the outcomes, the prognosis, you need to understand your diagnosis, and it takes courage to make a decision where you want to reclaim your life by reclaiming your health. So we'd love to share that story on our podcast on this Eat Real to Heal show. So thanks everyone for being here, and special thanks goes out to Becky for editing our show each week and for putting all the social media pieces together. Thank you. Couldn't do the show without Becky. And thanks to our team out there as well, who is always getting me on other people's podcasts as well as recruiting guests to our show. So everyone, eat well, do well, go out there, move your body, make healthy food choices, and follow us in my 22 million strong training tribe Facebook group so you can learn how I'm training to run and cycle across Canada in 75 days on a plant-based diet. So talk to you soon, everyone. Bye for now.